Tesla's future rolling down the streets. Cybercab visions where tomorrow meets. All the AI minds are shaping our skies. Nobels for the visionaries, no surprise. Stories of a week where tech inspires. Last week in AI.
Hello and welcome to the Last Week in AI podcast. We can hear us chat about what's going on with AI. As usual in this episode, we will be summarizing and discussing some of last week's most interesting AI news. And as always, you can also check out our Last Week in AI newsletter at lastweekin.ai, where we have weekly emails with even more articles and even more news, and also everything related to this podcast with links and so on. I am one of your regular hosts, Andrey Kurenkov. For some background, I studied AI at Stanford, and now I work at a startup. And once again, Jeremy is still out for paternal leave for a little while longer, so we do have a guest host once again. And once again, Jon Krohn is filling in that role.
I'm your irregular co-host.
Yes. Yeah.
It's great to be back on. Thank you so much for inviting me again, Andre. And we hear Jeremy is doing well. Everyone's healthy. Baby's healthy. Mother's healthy. That's great.
That's right. It's going well. And from what he's told me, he will be back relatively soon. Hopefully, either in the next episode or the episode after that, he will be getting Jeremy back, which I'm sure any older regular listeners will be excited, as am I.
Yeah, I mean, it's an invaluable income stream to be co-hosting this show. Every episode that I'm in here, I'm like $1 million richer, and Jeremy's missing out on that. So he's got to get back in.
Yeah, you get paid in fun and news awareness. That's what you get.
You do get lots of news awareness. I do like that about it. I guess in case people haven't been listening to episodes that I've been in before, I will try to keep this short this time. I'm co-founder and chief data scientist at an AI company called Nebula. I wrote a best-selling book called Deep Learning Illustrated. I host what I'm pretty sure is the world's most listened to data science podcast called Super Data Science. Andre and Jeremy have both been guests on that show. And I mentioned a little bit last time that I was on that there's TV stuff developing, and that has continued. There's like 2 separate TV projects that are developing that I'm really excited about. And I can't wait till I can share some things publicly on those.
Wow, that's really exciting. I'll be keeping an eye out, and I'm curious. Like, we did promote the podcast for quite a while on this show, and so I would hope that a lot of listeners of Last Week in AI are also fans of Super Data Science.
There's at least one, because I got an Apple Podcast review maybe 2 months ago that somebody, well, although it wasn't necessarily related to us having sponsored your show, because they said that they heard me on the show, they came over, now they love Super Data Science as well. So I'll try to look up while you're doing your Apple Podcast updates. I'll have a look at mine to see what this person's kind of name was and what they said. So I know that there's one.
There you go. You're also getting paid in listeners, hopefully. Well, before we get into the whole set of news, I do want to try something a bit new, just a quick news preview to let people know everything that's coming up, since we do have like 2-hour-long episodes.
That is so smart. That is something, as a listener, something that I've got to say is that this podcast is the only podcast that I listen to, Last Week in AI. And so that is something that I man, this is on my wish list. This is exciting.
Listen to your users. So to give that preview, we will be a bit lighter on news this week. There wasn't quite as much heavy-hitting topics. We're going to have a lot of news regarding Adobe. They just had an event where they covered a lot of new tools coming to their suite of creative tooling. We'll be probably talking about Tesla for a decent while as far as business goes. They had their big We Robot event with a lot of cool stuff. Maybe not, we'll talk about it. Then there are some exciting open source projects that will be maybe a pretty big topic. We'll be talking about the Nobel Prize Awards, of course, which happened last week and had quite a lot in AI. And we'll be talking a little bit about policy and safety. There's not quite as much going on, probably talking quite a bit about Anthropic and what they posted. So there you go. It's going to be kind of a mixed week, nothing too huge, but definitely some interesting things going on.
You should pause on all safety and policy stories till Jeremy comes back. It's just
and then just catch up. Yeah. And then before diving in, as usual, quick shout out to any listener comments and corrections. I did not happen to catch much on that front this past week. So in lieu of having those kinds of comments, I did just want to say on Apple Podcasts, I took a look. We do have 226 ratings now, which is, I don't know, it used to be like 200 a couple months ago.
That's right.
Yeah, so I imagine, hopefully it seems like some listeners are leaving reviews, just star ratings without reviewing it in text. And thank you as well. That does presumably help in our algorithm. I don't know. But it feels nice. Our average went up by 0.1, 4.7 out of 5. So
that's really annoying. I'm going to have to go in and give a 1-star because we're still at 4.6 at Super Data Science. So you guys going up to 4.7 is completely unacceptable to me.
Well, I'm sure if you got more reviews that could go down, you got to revert to a mean and so on, right? So.
And I did find here, so on August 23rd, someone, I don't know, do you know this person, D321P? Is that a friend of yours?
I probably would forget the name if it was.
So D321P wrote in an Apple podcast review for Super Data Science, said, I'm a loyal Last Week in AI listener and heard you as a guest on their show and figured I would hear your episodes, and I'm glad I did.
Great. That's nice to hear.
Thanks, D321P. It really rolls off the tongue.
It really does. Okay, let's get into the news. We start with tools and apps. And as we promised, the big topic here will be Adobe. And they've had their Adobe Max 2024 Creativity Conference. And as usual, at these sorts of events, we got a whole bunch of news regarding new stuff. And a lot of it was AI. And the big news was their AI video model. So they've had their image generation models for quite a while under the Firefly umbrella. And now they have the AI video model. They've had it in beta for a decent amount of time, just for people to use. I believe in website form, they kind of previewed it. Now it is available in the beta in Premiere Pro, which is their program for editing videos. It's one of the kind of leading products on that front. And you can extend footage by up to 2 seconds or make mid-shot adjustment. And that's just one of the tools here. So they have that generative extend. They also have text to video, which is only available as a limited public beta on the web app. This would allow you to use, the usual kind of thing like Sora, like we covered last week with Movie Gen. It is able to produce 5-second clips with not quite HD resolution, but pretty good looking quality. Just looking at the examples they put out, it is up there in terms of the footage not being obviously AI for the most part. And they do have also image to video, where you have a reference image along with a text prompt for more control. And they say one of the things you could do is camera control, like saying this should pan left or right. Last note, as with all the Firefly tools, they do say that this is commercially safe, meaning that they didn't use copyrighted data to train, and so you should be fine to actually use it to produce commercial video, I suppose.
So I know that you're an Adobe fan. Have you used this, Andrey?
I have not, because I don't do much aside from editing podcasts, and generative expand so far is not very useful. Maybe I'll add some special effects, which would be interesting. They do showcase the ability to generate kind of nice overlay of special effects or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I did play around in Photoshop with their tools that are AI based. They really have some very nice things, particularly when it comes to cropping. Like the ability to crop an individual object is just totally different. It used to be like a time-consuming process. You had to like go all around the borders of an object. Now AI will just do it for you, and it's great. Similarly, also like the infill of images to reduce noise, just a lot of nice stuff that is directly integrated. And I would imagine that would be kind of for video editors, for people create more kind of creative videos. This could be useful for B-roll and other things like that.
Yeah, it's super cool. I watched the video of this AI video model. Of course, they're going to be cherry picking the ones that don't look AI generated. You'd have to. How could you not do that? But simultaneously, like you say, some of these features are really cool. Like being able to have an existing video clip. I mean, you could take this footage that we have right now, the YouTube version of this podcast, and you could put like, flames behind me, or as we talk about fireflies, I guess, around us or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so that's some pretty cool functionality, being able to change the camera angle. And I haven't seen that. I don't think I've seen that in the other generative video tools yet.
Yeah, it could be the case maybe that you could try it with Imagen, since they do support some fancier like video editing, although I think that was primarily for changing the actual content of a clip, not the camera. So that could be something unique to this. And it would make sense because this would be pretty much, meant for actual usage by people creating this sort of stuff. So it might be different from Sora and Imagen, for instance. Moving right along, we get a couple more stories related to Adobe, and this is about upcoming things that are more in preview stage. So they previewed a couple experimental AI tools. One of them is Project Scenic, which will generate 3D scenes based on user input and then use that as a reference to generate a 2D image, something that I find pretty interesting. So the idea being that you do have essentially sort of a set of objects, house, tent, something like that, and you lay out a scene, and then you can use that as a reference to generate a 2D image with your typical AI model that will, kickstart that process with that pretty structured 3D scene. So not something I've seen, and something that is interesting. They also did preview Project Motion, which is for creating animated graphics in various styles, and Project Clean Machine, which is an editing tool that automatically removes distractions in images and videos like camera flashes or people walking into frames. So there you go. They've been announced at the same conference as, they call them sneaks in development projects. So we'll probably not be seeing this integrated for a while. Maybe it won't even come out. But, as people who track AI research, some of these things are pretty interesting and not necessarily something we do see in other tools or in research.
And I was saying before we started recording that thanks to this podcast, I do get a good sense of what's going on with Adobe innovations. And I'm really glad that I get that, because we hear, for whatever reason, whenever OpenAI releases something, everyone hears about it. Anthropic, same kind of situation. It doesn't seem to be it doesn't seem to get as much reach when Adobe makes these announcements, but these are big deals. Each one of these kind of capabilities sounds super useful. And the key thing that Adobe is getting right here is that, assuming that these capabilities work well, having them in the flow of somebody using an Adobe product without having to go off and use some other tool, having everything integrated like that, that, in my view, is the key to success with generative AI.
Exactly. Yeah. We were talking, I believe, just in last episode with Imagen that Movie Gen is very cool, just like Sora, but on the other hand, it's not released and it's maybe not even practical to use because of the amount of compute, the time it would take, which was also the case with Sora. It would take way too long to actually use in practice. And also, it likely isn't actually targeting a major pain point for many people. Generating video from text is cool, but aside from B-roll, it's not necessarily the case that it would be useful. They do have video editing as a major feature where you can revise aspects of a video. That's definitely one of these more practical things that would be useful. And these sorts of things like, this Project Motion, which is for creating animated graphics, Project Clean Machine, they're definitely less sexy, right? But they're presumably much more useful in those kinds of workflows. And one last story about Adobe. They have another experimental prototype called Project Supersonic. And this one is meant to generate audio effects for video projects. So this would use text to audio, object recognition, and voice imitation to create background audio and sound effects. So this is something we've seen from other companies like 11 Labs, with audio effects being these very short snippets, right, of like, I don't know, a ball hitting the ground and things like that you obviously need in videos to make them really be realistic, and which is decently less hard than generating full-on music. So this is, I would say, definitely something that seems like it will be coming to the Adobe Creative Suite, although currently it is just a demo.
As you described, having this as part of the Creative Suite, again, in the flow, generative AI, and addressing a pain point, like you said, that's another really important thing to hammer home here, is that if you're not addressing a pain point other than being cool, how is that going to be a big commercial success? So lots of applause for Adobe. Keep it up.
At the lightning round, we are moving away from Adobe, but we are keeping on with these kind of tools. The first story is about YouTube expanding AI audio generation tool to all US creators. So they've had this Dream Track tool that was first introduced in 2023. It would allow users to generate short instrumental audio clips based on text prompts. So it would basically create sort of royalty-free soundtracks about 30 seconds long. And as per the title, now it is being released to all US creators. So that would presumably help a lot of people making short clips on YouTube. YouTube does have their shorts thing, which is similar to TikTok and Instagram Reels. And you can see how having something that's royalty free could often be something useful. So very much in keeping with YouTube also releasing tools like Veo for text to video also on YouTube.
It seems like we're almost just saying the same story again. It's like
exactly.
It's exactly the same story as with Adobe. These are in the flow tools that are useful for people. Exactly like being able to generate shorts easily, clips easily, instrumental audio, and now this Dream Tracks. Yeah, very cool. I'm sure it will do well, and it's great that they're offering it to all the creators.
Exactly, and I think it's interesting to have these stories now because it was just at the beginning of the year that we got Sora, right? It was last year. Text to video was very much nascent. Sora was very mind blowing at the time for the quality of video it could generate, and now almost nearing the end of the year, we are getting to the point where these things are actually being deployed and commercialized, AI video tools. So that tells you something about the speed at which AI is being developed and rolled out by different companies.
I guess a key distinction here, my assumption is, I don't see it explicitly, but I believe all of these tools being offered to US creators by YouTube, these are free to use.
Yes.
So that is a distinction relative to Adobe. And it also, so the assumption here is that Alphabet downstream will get more revenue from having slicker videos and creating an easy ecosystem that creators want to be in and using and publishing videos in to continue to maintain their position as, if I'm still correct on the stat, YouTube is the number 2 most visited site in the world after Google.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, YouTube is massive for people who don't go very much. It, in terms of time usage, is above Instagram, above TikTok, above many of these things that you already think of as places where people spend time. And my impression is YouTube Shorts haven't been quite as successful as those other things. So could be also a reason for Google to be pushing this, to try and push that along. And speaking of Google and rolling out tools to more users, we've got a similar story. Now all Gemini users can generate images with Imagen free. So we have had Imagen free for quite a while. It was pretty limited, and now you can use it in Gemini. Similar to ChatGPT, you can generate images in Gemini by just saying prompts with like draw, generate, create, X image. Interestingly, these generated images do come with a synth ID watermark. So if you try and detect whether this came from a Gemini, you can actually authenticate an image as AI generated or not. This is not currently available for free users, so this is being made available to people who are paying: Gemini Advanced, Business, and Enterprise.
It's interesting, this word, which you very confidently pronounced as Imagen. I'm always like, I'm never sure. And I guess I could watch I/O 2024, Google I/O 2024 to get how they pronounce it. But it's interesting because for people who are listening to this podcast, and if you want to look it up, you don't type Imagen into your Google search. You type Imagen. Imagen, which is, it's a clever name because it's like imagine, because you're creating something, you're imagining something, while it is also image generation. So Imagen.
I think Imagen, yeah, that probably makes more sense, but I guess doesn't roll off the tongue quite as easily as Imagen. So
yeah.
And just quick correction, I may have spoken. So the feature to generate images with people is not currently available for free users. Of course, Gemini had quite an embarrassment with regards to that when it first rolled out image generation. So they have reintroduced it, but they're still limiting it to people who are paying. Moving right along, and we are keeping with the theme of AI being rolled out more widely. Next up is Meta AI, and they will be launching in 6 more countries today. Those countries are Brazil, Bolivia, Guatemala, Paraguay, Philippines, and the UK. And they have said they also plan to launch in many more countries in the coming weeks. Countries like Algeria, Egypt, Indonesia, Morocco, and so on. So they'll be, of course, adding support for new languages. And these Meta AI tools are, all these things they've introduced throughout Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, the chatbots, and so on. It is not going to include the European Union due to regulatory concerns. And we've seen that with a couple of things, not just Meta AI. So people in Europe, not getting Meta AI, not sure if they're going to be upset about it. Personally, I've not used these things and haven't benefited too much. Either way, Meta AI is being rolled out more widely.
I wonder if you could just change your location and get access. It seems like a pretty easy thing to do, because I don't think for most of these things, I guess with WhatsApp, you provide your phone number, so that has a country code. But for Facebook, Instagram, presumably you could just change where your country is, I guess, and get access to these tools. If not, then great work, UK. You finally got something out of Brexit. Your economy has struggled for years since leaving the EU, but you get Meta AI. Nicely done.
Yes. Yeah. Your ability to regulate less harshly. The UK doesn't have the EU AI Act, of course, because of Brexit. Does lead to more business-friendly results like these, for sure. And the last story here. Finally, we are doing something a bit different. No more AI being rolled out to more people. And this one is bit intriguing if you are more of a, let's say, nerd when it comes to AI. So the headline is OpenAI unveils secret meta prompt, and it's very different from Anthropic's approach. So it might first sound that this is the system prompt. That's what Anthropic revealed pretty recently. They showcased this is the actual thing that we give Claude when you give it an input. There's a whole bunch of text instructing Claude how to respond. We actually know what that is. With OpenAI, we don't know the system prompt, and this is different from the system prompt. This is a meta prompt that is used in a tool of theirs that can optimize a prompt. So you instruct the LLM here on how to improve the prompt. But either way, even if it's not a system prompt, the article goes into quite a bit of detail comparing the style of the prompt. So this one is pretty structured. They have, various sections with guidelines, steps using sort of markdown formatting, versus Anthropic, which, if you look at the system prompt, was a bit more narrative style, lots of paragraphs, stuff like that. So it's interesting to look at, again, if you think about things like system prompts and do prompt engineering.
Yeah, this is really cool. And this, if I'm reading this correctly, this that they've released, this meta prompt, is this specific to the O1 model family that's now being released?
I would have to check, but it wouldn't be surprising for me if that's the case. Yeah.
It seems like that's what this is, which is interesting. And that also explains things like, actually, I'm pretty positive that is, because there's things in the meta prompt around steps and how those should be broken down and revealed to users. So I think we talked about O1 last time I was on the show. That was brand new a couple of episodes ago on Last Week in AI. And I mean, I've been using O1 to tremendous effect. Actually, just in the last few days, it constantly blows my mind. And I don't know, it is cool to be able to see under the hood a bit. It is also nice to see OpenAI being a bit open with what they're doing here. I guess, if there's kind of an openness arms race that Anthropic or other players encourage in this space, that's great. Keep it up.
That's right. And these prompts are from their documentation. So, not quite as public as Anthropic. Anthropic had more of a blog post and a whole bunch of kind of discussion of revealing the system prompt. This is in the internals of the OpenAI platform, where they also discuss prompt engineering guidelines, stuff like that. So this is just an example of a meta prompt you might give. It's not even something that OpenAI necessarily uses, although it is likely that this kind of prompt engineering is what they do. Moving right along to applications and business, and we begin with Tesla. So if you're a big fan of autonomous driving and robots, as I am, we had pretty interesting developments from Tesla this past week. They had a big We Robot event that has been kind of previewed and scheduled for quite a while, where Elon Musk has been saying for a long time, we'll be revealing a lot of stuff regarding our autonomous driving taxi service that is set to be a major focus of Tesla. They held that event last week, and there were some very cool things. So they did show a new Cybercab a new Cybercab car. This is a futuristic looking car, kind of if you take the Cybertruck, condense it into a regular-ish sedan with two doors, no steering wheel, two seats. The doors are, go vertical when they open, not a regular door. So lots of fancy sci-fi looking stuff, basically. And the idea being that these kinds of cars will enter full production in, let's say, 2-3 years. 2026 was the promise, said before 2027. And this would be how they roll out that taxi service. In addition to that, they also had a Robovan. Unclear why it's not a Cybervan, but either way, Robovan, kind of a similar idea, very futuristic, but capable of seating 20 passengers instead of just a couple. on top of all that, also at the event, they had a whole bunch of their Optimus humanoid robots just throughout the event. They had them serving drinks. They had them chatting to people. And, there were a lot of promises being made or projections of these kinds of robots being available for $20,000 to $30,000 and being able to do all sorts of things like being personal assistants. So there you go. Lots of cool things at this event, but not very many specific details. And even the demo of the of this new Cybercab was on rails. It was held at a movie studio, so it was a very safe kind of demo. And the Optimus robots seemingly were teleoperated. They were not autonomous. People were in control and talking to people. So the stock price actually went down by a decent amount, by 8%, because investors did react, thinking that this might be more style than substance.
Yeah, exactly. And when you just got an inbuilt meme really nicely there when you do it on a Hollywood set, and it seems like what you're pitching is a fantasy more than reality. It really worked all too nicely for that hit in the stock price the next day. Much higher expectations than were realized with this, evidently from an investor's perspective. And part of that is that if you think about a big competitor in the autonomous driving space, Waymo is the leader here. I think it's fair to say without question. And Waymo Alphabet has invested $30 billion in Waymo in developing a complex system involving radar, LiDAR, as well as very detailed 3D mapping of environments that works in conjunction with just video cameras. Whereas what Tesla is proposing here is that the Cybercab, and I guess later the Robovan, and you're right, why isn't that the Cybervan? Cybertruck, Cybercab, Robovan. Anyway, maybe the Cybercab is going to be something else. The Cybervan is going to be something else. And so what Tesla has been trying to do for years is to have their quote unquote full self-driving, which is a marketing term as opposed to a reality. And so I did an episode actually on the 5 levels of self-driving cars. If you want to check out Super Data Science 810, episode number 810, I specifically talk about the 5 levels of autonomy that you can have in cars. And while full self-driving is described as full self-driving, this is solely a marketing term. It is not full self-driving because you still need to have somebody sitting probably, unless they're very short. They'll be sitting behind the wheel of a Tesla vehicle, and part of the big hurdle that Tesla is facing is that their AI team is trying to develop some kind of way to have true full self-driving, not just marketing full self-driving, where you don't need a steering wheel, where you don't need pedals, with only video cameras. And that may never work. So, they talk here about the Cybercab having rolled out in probably 2026, said Elon Musk, but certainly before 2027. And I don't know how both of those things can be true. Probably in 2026, definitely before 2027. So I guess, around 2026, 2027. But that depends on regulatory approval. And having just video cameras could be a really tricky way to do that. The gambit here is that it would be a lot cheaper. So Waymo's approach, while it has created these beautiful Jaguars that are really nice to sit in, you have a really luxurious experience, and the drive is amazing because thanks to the LiDAR, the radar, that detailed mapping, as well as video cameras. You feel really safe. The experience is amazing, but those cars are very expensive to build. And so it actually means today that when you're in a Waymo, it costs more to create that experience for you than it does to have a human driving the car. Now, of course, over time, those costs will go down. You get economies of scale. But yeah, I guess the idea here, what Tesla is hoping to be able to do is to be able to leapfrog all of that by trying to have video cameras only work, and then that allows them to sell these Cybercabs for just $30,000, or less. Whereas from memory, my memory of a Waymo Jaguar is about 4 times that. So I guess we'll see how it works out. Definitely a big risk, could be big rewards. I guess shareholders at this time are betting that the risk reward ratio is out of balance.
Exactly. And to be fair, I mean, it's worth noting that Tesla is, I believe, still valued more than all other automakers combined. Like, this is not a normal car company. That's their main business, is selling Tesla cars, but their stock price reflects a very optimistic future where they go beyond that. They at least, get a big share of the self-driving taxi business, or they get a big share of a humanoid robot market, things like that. So that's already priced in, essentially, in the stock price. So if they can't deliver on these things in the next couple of years, the stock price would presumably take a big hit. And as you said, currently, if you're a Tesla owner, you do have this FSD, full self-driving. I think it's called beta still. And as we covered earlier this year, for a long time, FSD was really bad. It was like scary to use. With FSD 12 and the latest iterations of it, it's gotten a lot better. So they have moved to this fully AI approach that uses video and training from their giant amount of data from people driving around. Now, if you use FSD, it is definitely much better, much more human-like, much more reasonable. But Tesla also kind of tweaked the terminology. So they now call it supervised FSD. That's what you have at a Tesla. It's not just FSD, it's supervised FSD. And so they also promised in this presentation a fully unsupervised FSD being launched in Texas and California by 2025 in their cars, right? So that's kind of a less sexy detail, but a very important detail is, as you said, they need to get unsupervised FSD right. And what that means is you can let the car do its thing. You can just give up control and not be scared of what it's going to do. And that's the case with Waymo now. And they've had it working in San Francisco for quite a while. They're testing it in LA. They're trying to expand to more cities. Tesla doesn't have that yet. And it's going to be very interesting to see if they're able to actually deliver on it by 2025, as I say. Next story, not quite as exciting, but still pretty notable. As we've covered, OpenAI has been making a lot of deals this year with various media organizations. So they have now announced a new one. They have made a deal with media conglomerate Hearst, which owns outlets such as Houston Chronicle, the San Francisco Chronicle, Esquire, Cosmopolitan, and Elle. So this is adding up to a bunch more deals that they've done. And now these products like ChatGPT and SearchGPT will display content from over 20 magazine brands and more than 40 newspapers as part of this partnership. And they have many more deals that they've secured over the past year. And as we've said, it might not seem necessarily like a huge deal, but this could be a real differentiator from something like Perplexity or Claude even, right? If you have to pay for access to the latest news via these media organizations, and you have to make these kinds of deals, OpenAI is the main player that we know of making those kinds of deals. And they seem to, continue doing this with this latest development. So it would be interesting to see if all these stories, if all these deals pay off.
And just 2 nights ago, at the time of recording, I had dinner with someone named Peter Goldstein, who he speaks on generative AI in public generally, really well-spoken, highly educated guy. And he happens to be the chief AI strategist for Hearst. And so this deal had just been announced. And so now I can tell you all the secret thing. No, I mean, he was extremely professional. You got absolutely nothing, no behind the scenes information.
No juicy details, no drama.
Absolutely nothing at all. He was a consummate professional. It is interesting. Yeah, this is just that trend that we're seeing across generative AI, where initially these LLMs were able to train by just scraping everything. Nobody had the robots.txt set up in a way to prevent that kind of scraping, because it was a completely new way of a completely novel approach to scraping and generating intellectual property. And so now everyone's woken up, including Hearst, New York Times, tons of these big publishing organizations, Springer, Verlag, internationally, lots of publishers waking up to how much value they can provide to the superscalers in particular. And at a time when, those same superscalers are threatening their traditional business models, because generative AI tools prevent you from getting, say, a Google search result that causes somebody to click through to an asset like Cosmopolitan or Esquire or the San Francisco Chronicle, instead of needing to click through to that article where the San Francisco Chronicle has ads, display ads that allows them to generate business. Instead, the Gen AI tool just provides the answer. And we don't today have, Gen AI tools can do retrieval augmented generation and act in a kind of agentic way to be pulling information in real time over the web. Often when it does that, it does actually provide you with the source. Maybe you'd click. But I suspect that we're going to, as time goes on, have LLMs be increasingly real-time updated, their model weights updated based on real-time information, so that when you're doing, say, a Google search, Gemini will bring back for you an LLM exact answer to your question in real time, as opposed to you needing to, click on some Google suggestion and see the result. And so that, again, it eats into the business model of, historically newspapers, magazines, obviously they always had ads, but you were also paying to have it show up at your door. Not a lot of people do that anymore. That's already really eaten into their business model. So now they're more dependent than ever on ads, specifically digital ads. And now generative AI poses a threat to that model. And so I'm glad that they're able to get some revenue back from being able to at least monetize the high value content creation that they do. Because, if we end up in a world where you just have Gen AI models learning from generated content online, that might not be ideal, though maybe we can figure out ways of making that work. So, makes sense from the perspective of someone like OpenAI to be paying for Gen AI content, high quality content. Hearst gets to make back some of the money that they could lose now or in the future, I guess, by not being able to have people click through as often on, say, a Google search to their ads. And in the long run, this does pose interesting questions for not only publishers' business models in terms of ads, but also someone like Google's. Because, their own tools like a Gemini search, there's rumors that Google DeepMind had similar kinds of capabilities to ChatGPT, but it wasn't released because that eats into Google's core business model of display advertising, click-through advertising, digital attribution. When you have Gen AI models that are just providing exactly the information people want, right now mostly in a text display, where maybe you can find ways of sneaking some display ads in on the side, but in the future, you're going to have more and more interaction with these tools through just voice and audio. And how do you then insert sponsorship in there? Like maybe you can have, kind of boosted results. And I guess that's some way that people will go, but it seems like one way or another, Google's business model will get eaten into. Their decades now of absolute, effectively monopolistic dominance in search, where that's all paid for by digital advertising, could be eaten into here.
Yeah. So, lots to say there. I think this is one of these stories in general and these trends not very sexy. They're not getting like the main headlines, and they're not, being the topic that's getting all the hype on Twitter, etc. But it's actually like subtly a very important thing to be aware of and think about, because it speaks to really the future of the internet and the future of search, right? And so, in comparison to all these deals from OpenAI, Perplexity AI has also done something kind of similar. They have a revenue sharing model. They have this publishers program where they've also had companies like Fortune, Time, Entrepreneur, etc., join on, and it's very much on point, as you said. Perplexity AI, Source GPT, they'll be showing their sources. They'll be providing links, but for the most part, presumably, you won't be clicking to go to those sources. You'll just be reading what the AI says. So we do need some kind of new business model for the people actually writing up the news, right? And this increasingly seems like that business model. And not just that, but we've seen also Reddit and Twitter, at least Reddit for sure, sign deals to license their data to, I believe, Google. And that's another aspect of the internet now, where any content that we provide on these platforms can be monetized for data. So it's one of these realities that is kind of interesting, and it speaks to like the development of the internet at large and our information ecosystem at large, even though it's a little bit dry on the face of it.
One thing that I was reminded of as you were speaking there, you touched on it a little bit, or it led me to this thought, which I think is really important here, which is the ethical quandary as well, where as this kind of business model where you're, the way that you phrased it there, where you were talking about how, who's going to actually pay the journalists who are creating the high quality content. And so once you are a newspaper, a magazine, where maybe in the not so distant future, most of your revenue comes from Gen AI companies, how does that affect your reporting about Gen AI companies? So if a player like OpenAI or Anthropic, Cohere becomes like, this unavoidable monolith in kind of culture in general, really influential, and simultaneously they're paying all the bills at all the information sources that we get our information from, there's an ethical quandary there. It's interesting. Are you going to get unbiased reporting?
Exactly. And, there's a lot of interesting implications. Like, for the ad model, we've seen quite a bit of, shift to clickbait, essentially, and getting headlines and things that drive people to click through and read the article. With this shift, right, that's not kind of as important. So maybe people will start covering things that are just trendy, that people will be asking Search GPT about, right? And there's a whole lot more to say on this. Like New York Times, for instance, they've moved to a subscription-based monetization model in large part. So more and more media publishers need subscription-type revenue streams, which is a little bit distinct. Anyway, I think we've said enough of this, but there you go, OpenAI paying even more media publishers. Onto projects and open source. We've got a few neat stories here, starting with OpenR, an open source AI framework enhancing reasoning in large language models. And this is actually paired with a paper that describes the whole system, not just an open source project. The broad idea is essentially to provide a framework that allows you to do O1 type reasoning with open models. And this is a collaboration from a bunch of organizations: University College London, University of Liverpool, the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and some other ones. So they go into a lot of detail about how the model works. They treat it as an MVP, right, where you have sequential steps essentially of the LLM, and then for each step you can provide a reward. They have a whole paradigm for training the reasoning to be able to do good reasoning step by step. And they do show some interesting empirical results where you can see that using this reasoning paradigm as you increase the generation budget, something we've talked about a lot, the inference scaling that you get as post training, you can now just scale the amount of time and resources you give your model to be able to generate a better answer. So here they also do that experiment and show that, in fact, this approach results in better outputs and even does better than just simple things like majority vote. Unfortunately, this is coming from some universities, so it's not really evaluated at scale. It's some pretty small models. But either way, I imagine we'll be seeing a lot of this sort of stuff with open source efforts to replicate O1 type reasoning. Moving right along, we've got another open source release. This time it's a benchmark. It's the MLE benchmark, evaluating machine learning agents on machine learning engineering, and it's actually coming out of OpenAI. So this benchmark is meant to look at machine learning engineering tasks, and if you're a software engineer, you might find this kind of fun and interesting. This benchmark includes 75 machine learning engineering related competitions from Kaggle. So Kaggle is a platform that's been around for quite a while. They do have competitions where you can submit an answer to a machine learning problem, where if you're in a top performer, you can actually earn money. And there's been many participants. It's a pretty big platform. So in this benchmark, they allow agents to try and win in these competitions. And they have some interesting comparisons looking at different scaffolds that take actions by calling tools. They also have this aid thing, which is purpose-built to perform at research over solutions on Kaggle competitions. And they actually say agents run autonomously for up to 24 hours in their experiments. So if you look at figure for GPT-4o MLab, they have total steps 216 and runtime 2 hours. For GPT-4o aid, they say they have 30 nodes in its research with a runtime of 24 hours. So pretty, it's getting very autonomous at this stage. And the benchmark is pretty hard. So even for the best performing model, O1 preview, to get the medal, which is to say to place well, to place better than most people, O1 is only able to do that 17% of the time, roughly. And these models often make invalid submissions. So even the best one only gets to 82% valid submissions, which hopefully most humans are able to do. And if you don't do this aid thing, which is purpose-built for Kaggle, you do much worse. You're going to single-digit percentages on the medal placement and 50-40% valid submission rates. So a very intriguing new benchmark in the realm of agentic AI, software engineering AI, and we'll be seeing if we can, destroy it, as has been the case of many AI benchmarks.
Yeah, this is great. Exactly. Yeah, we're just constantly having to come up with more and more complex benchmarks. A couple of years ago, this would have seemed like an insane benchmark. Like, what are you creating this for? Obviously, a machine can't do this. I don't know if a machine will be able to do this in my lifetime. I mean, this is something you and I, in your Super Data Science podcast episode, Andrey, we talked about how mind-blowing for both of us the release of GPT-4 was. And for both of us, that was a moment that we were like, holy crap, AGI in our lifetimes, ASI in our lifetimes. This is probably happening. And so, pre-GPT-4, if somebody had said they were making a benchmark where you're evaluating people on these extremely difficult machine learning engineering tasks that require a lot of thinking, a lot of outside information, a lot of steps, I would have said, why? That's a waste of time. I don't know if we'll have machines that can do that in our lifetime. And now, this aid scaffolding AIDE sounds like a key part of the success that OpenAI is getting here on the benchmark. And so to be getting, as you said, O1 preview, which of course it's O1, that is vastly outperforming all the other models that they tested with the 8 framework. So they also use GPT-4o. They use the biggest llama, which is 405B, huge, and Claude 3.5 Sonnet. The 8 framework with those models, as you said, it was the only way that you could get kind of any decent performance. Like other than that, other than using the aid approach, the best score was 4%, 4% chance of getting any medal in these competitions. Or maybe a good thing to be looking at here would be looking at the above median performance. So, you could get 7% of your performances above median human performance, human submission performance without aid. With aid, you're able to get 7% or better with any of the LLMs that I just said: GPT-4o, Llama 3.1 405B, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and O1 Preview won't be a shock at all to people who have used O1. Crushes any of the other models where aid was involved. And so, the next best model was GPT-4o, which achieved 14% above median scores with aid. O1 Preview got double that, 29%. And, we know that the full O1 model will be out soon. It's interesting that even the internal researchers at OpenAI weren't able to use that. I guess it's just too early in development. And so, when that comes out, you can expect that to continue to go up. So you start to have, these are relatively low percentages. The best approach here only gets a third of its answers above the median human performance. But these are extremely difficult tasks with so many steps. And I bet you in a year, this is the kind of thing we'll be looking at not 30%, but we'll be looking at 80%.
Exactly. I think that's, almost certainly the case. And as you said, it's pretty mind-blowing to consider what we're getting here, right? We're getting fully agentic AI that does basically just decides how to go about solving a problem and then does it. With the case of aid, they do run it for 24 hours and they, do all sorts of search processes and so on. So it'll be only getting better and better at this benchmark over time. And it's kind of interesting, like, the best system is able to get 10% gold on these competitions. So maybe you could earn some money, by getting the AI model to work well, although that might be more effort than actually winning the competitions. And now another release from OpenAI. This time it's more of a package, and the package is Swarm, an experimental AI framework for building, orchestrating, and deploying multi-agent systems. So this is paired with this kind of cookbook post that is basically an example of something you might do called Orchestrating Agents, Routines, and Handoffs. So under the OpenAI organization on GitHub, where you share code, they did release this Swarm package, which in very bold font says experimental, educational, right? So I found that kind of amusing how much they emphasize that this is just a simple framework. It's not meant to be a standalone library and is mainly for educational resources. Either way, the idea with Swarm is that you can have agents that, for instance, hold an ongoing chat with you based on some instructions, and then they can do handoffs. So you can say, okay, now you go interact with this other agent. Kind of like if you call your health insurance or something, and you talk to one person and they transfer you to another person. That's a basic idea here. And so, very much, not a huge deal in the sense that this is experimental and educational, but does indicate OpenAI continuing to invest in agentic AI and having more autonomous AI as the future.
Yeah, this is definitely a big release. I'm glad that we're covering it in this episode. And this is certainly what I've seen is probably the biggest splash in the past week on my social media channels. And I think agentic AI is it's the most exciting topic right now that we have in AI. These systems becoming increasingly autonomous, multi-agent systems being able to work together. And actually, on that note, I'm going to plug something that I'm doing, which is on December 4th, Wednesday, December 4th, at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern time. I'm running an online conference in the O'Reilly platform that is all about agentic AI. So we have a number of experts coming in, all great speakers in this space. talking about multi-agent systems and how and there's hands-on sessions teaching you how you can use open source tools in Python to be able to develop your own multi-agent systems for particular tasks. So I think this is the most, when I was thinking about what topic should I be covering in this upcoming conference online, I was like, Agentic AI, no brainer. And so I think it's super exciting. And no doubt we'll be talking about Swarm there on December 4th.
And on to research and advancements. And we have some kind of unusual stories. Usually we go into papers and so on, but the only place I could think to put this news in is in this section. And the news is the Nobel Prize being awarded to some AI people. So first up, we got the Nobel Physics Prize being awarded to two scientists, John J. Hopfield and Geoffrey E. Hinton, who basically were very instrumental in the development of neural networks and all the lead up to deep learning, large neural nets. Geoffrey Hinton is one of these big names that has had a massive impact on the history of AI, and not just in the way you might think. So he has been a big player over the last 2 decades. He was part of what kind of resurfaced and repopularized neural nets with some work in 2006, where he used some ideas from previous work to have an initialization scheme and really demonstrate for maybe the first time that you can get a very large neural network to be very performant. But also going back decades to the 80s, Geoffrey Hinton arguably was a big player also in repopularizing neural networks then, with the release and with the kind of documentation almost of this backpropagation algorithm that is a backbone of neural network training. So this was not exactly new at the time. There's been previous developments of the same algorithm, but the paper that Geoffrey Hinton published with some other authors definitely popularized it, made it very accessible and well understood, and made neural nets kind of hyped up in the 80s. And later, Hinton's work also led to it being hyped up in the 2000s and 2010s, and that's how we got here. So, many people, including, I think, Hinton, commented that it's kind of funny that they got the physics prize. There's no computer science Nobel Prize, so, that's kind of funny. But either way, does speak to the impact of this. And John J. Hopfield, not to ignore that, was a big collaborator with Geoffrey Hinton. They worked together on the notion of Boltzmann machines, which are a little bit more physics-like, and turned out not to be the big player, but did contribute some ideas in the development of neural networks.
Yeah, and so I dug into this initially for a social media post, and then now for an episode of my podcast of Super Data Science that'll be coming out soon. I don't know if it'll be out before this Last Week in AI episode or not, so I won't even get into that. I'll just basically give you all the great content from that here, which is that I dug into, why was this a physics Nobel Prize at all? And so, as you already mentioned there's no kind of computer science or computing Nobel Prize. The closest kind of thing is the Turing Award, which Geoff Hinton, Yoshua Bengio, Yann LeCun already won in 2019, 18, one or the other.
Sounds right.
For their contributions on developing deep learning. And for the Nobel Prizes, I'm kind of imagining this kind of discussion where the Nobel Foundation, this is completely made up. Like, I'm imagining this, right? But it doesn't seem like a huge stretch of the imagination for the Nobel Foundation to be sitting around thinking, wow, AI is doing some really crazy things lately. Yes, there are certainly some risks, as Geoff Hinton himself has been talking about a lot lately since he left Google. But there's also huge, tremendous benefit to humankind. And they're like, we would love to be conferring some Nobel Prizes on people for their AI work, but we don't have a category that we can do it with. And so they're like, how can we do this? Okay, for physics, Geoff Hinton, who is arguably the most important single player in the development of deep learning, as you already went over in a lot of detail, Andrey, he collaborated conveniently with this guy, John Hopfield, whom I had never heard of before personally, having done a lot of research and writing on deep learning. But this Hopfield guy is a physicist. Hinton and him collaborated a lot, and he did make significant contributions to relatively early artificial neural network ideas, together with Hinton. And so, some of Hopfield's research is what they call biophysics, where you are trying to emulate the physics of biological systems. And this research fell into that. This neural network research in some way fell into that. And so it kind of ties together physics with Hinton in some way, and allows them to justify giving the physics prize to Hinton. And it's great to see him get a Nobel Prize. The next story that we're going to talk about with the Nobel Prize in chemistry, that one is more straightforward to understand. You have to make less of a leap.
Always fun to hear from Hinton. He's very direct in interviews. So this New York Times piece has a quote from him. So he said in this piece, if there was a Nobel Prize for computer science, our work would have clearly been more appropriate for that. But there isn't one. And just to be clear, the work from the 80s on Boltzmann machines and something known as Hopfield networks, which is actually by Dr. Hopfield, those do have more relation to physics, as you said. They, if you dig into the math, it relates to physics, and it did kind of connect to physics in some way. So not totally ridiculous, but somewhat strange. But a bit less strange is the Nobel Prize in chemistry, which is also deeply related to AI. So this went to Demis Hassabis and John Jumper from Google DeepMind and David Baker from the University of Washington. And guess what? It's for their work on AlphaFold and things like that. So as we've covered, in the past couple of years, DeepMind has done a lot of work on making AI models for scientific simulation and understanding. And the big one from them has been AlphaFold, to be able to model how proteins work. So it makes a decent amount of sense for this Nobel Prize. AlphaFold has had a very significant impact on the field and did represent a pretty massive amount of progress on this particular problem. So yeah, lots of Nobels going to people from AI this week.
Yeah, and you can expect more in the future, no question. I think that this kind of sets a precedent that just in the same way that the chemistry Nobel has, in a fair bit in recent years, gone to biological advancements, big, gene editing kinds of techniques where it's kind of like vaguely biochemistry in the same way that you could, say Jeff Hinton's stuff was kind of vaguely biophysics because he's working with a biophysicist, and like you say, the Hopfield networks. So, there was this argument in the past being used for chemistry, to be able to award lots of biological advancements. And this falls squarely into that category. We have superhuman abilities to be able to take the sequence of a protein and predict its three-dimensional structure, which is so mind-bogglingly complex. Like humans cannot do this, or on any of the kind of complex structures that AlphaFold can succeed on. And so this is an example of an artificial super intelligence. And so it isn't the kind of ASI that is associated with a singularity because it's not general. It is very narrow in its application, but this is one of my favorite examples. AlphaFold has been for some time now, been my favorite example of an artificial superintelligence where we now have, not just in terms of processing speed, but in terms of some intellectual capacity, a machine able to do something that humans cannot do. And that's pretty damn cool.
And not to give the only attention to DeepMind here, David Baker was also awarded the prize. He is a professor, not affiliated with DeepMind as far as I know, and he has also had a long history of research in proteins. His work led to the creation of a first synthetic protein, and he was a big part of the creation of Rosetta, which is similarly a computational tool for things like the design and small molecule docking. So another related sort of effort to create better computational tools for scientists. And, again, it might seem like Demis Hassabis, John Jumper aren't chemists per se, aren't scientists in the field. But as pointed out in statements, especially in chemistry and in these fields in general, experimental progress is still progress. It doesn't have to be conceptual, and that's what these computational efforts represent. And onto lightning round, going back to talking about agentic AI and throwing some cold water on it. We have a story, LLMs can't perform genuine logical reasoning, Apple researchers suggest. So this is a new paper released by people from Apple titled GSM-Symbolic, Understanding the Limitations of Mathematical Reasoning in Large Language Models. And what they did was modify GSM-8K, which is a standard benchmark with over 8,000 grade school level mathematical word problems. They modified it to have this set of symbolic templates that allowed for the generation of diverse set of equations. We covered a similar effort not too long ago from Scale, where they also generated variations on a popular benchmark. And when they tested the models on this new benchmark, once again, there was a big drop in performance. The drop in performance was between 0.3% and 9.2%, depending on the model, which means that essentially these models, to some degree, trained on the benchmark, or they were optimized for the benchmark. In theory, this is the same level of difficulty. There shouldn't be any change in performance on this new variation, but in fact there was. And there's some details here, like for instance, adding a single clause that seems relevant to a question causes significant performance drops, even though the clause doesn't contribute to the reasoning chain. There was also a high variance across different runs of a GSM-Symbolic with different names and values. So various details like that once again demonstrate benchmarking is hard, and we shouldn't trust numbers of benchmarks necessarily, because there's a lot of complications there.
As you talk about all the time on your show, benchmarks cannot be relied upon. And this is exactly the kind of thing that you see, that the kind of concern that you have when benchmarks come up. Everybody, when they release their LLM, they want it to be the state of the art across all the big benchmarks. And so it would be very hard to resist the temptation not to fine tune, at least, or to be trying in some way to be gaming those benchmarks, which are publicly available. It's not like you don't have access to the training data to be able to make your model perform. So it's unsurprising that the models perform worse. And yes, it should also come as no shock that LLMs can't perform genuine logical reasoning. They are not designed to. They are just predicting the next token, and it's amazing what they can do given that.
Yeah, and as we've seen before with these kinds of comparisons, the drop varies quite a bit. And when you get to larger, more sophisticated models, the drop is less bad. So actually for GPT-4o, they have a drop of less than 1%, 0.3%. O1 Mini, 0.6%. O1 Preview, 2%, versus something like Gemma and Mistral, which is 7 or 9%, pretty big drops. Which is to say that, the benchmarks can still be relied upon broadly for a general evaluation. It's not like the numbers are meaningless, but the exact numbers, the exact ranking of models, that's a bit where things like these kinds of benchmarks cannot necessarily be relied upon. And the next paper actually adds to that. So I found it fun to include both of these. The next paper is Not All LLM Reasoners Are Created Equal. And they do something a little bit different with the same benchmark. So they look at the grade school math benchmark, GSM. And instead of creating a new variation of that, what they do is have this interesting test where essentially you need to get 2 questions right in a row, as opposed to just one. And so what you would expect is your performance on this variation of a problem is your performance on the standard benchmark squared, right? You multiply your success rate by itself, because there's 2 problems in a row. And that's what you want to see ideally. And as with the Apple result, that's not actually what you see. There's a reasoning gap that emerges. And similarly, the gap is very comparable. We got, GPT-4o, these bigger models with relatively small gaps and huge, massive gaps for things like Phi-3 and Gemma, Llama-3, 8B, these smaller models, broadly speaking. So there you go. There's another demonstration on this particular benchmark that the benchmarks aren't quite as precise as would be ideal. Alrighty, moving on to policy and safety, we have a pretty interesting development related to Anthropic. So Anthropic CEO goes full techno-optimist in 15,000 word paean to AI is the pretty fun title of this TechCrunch article. And there you go. It's about this very long blog post that Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, released. Pretty unusual. There hasn't been, unlike Sam Altman, who goes like on all the podcasts and has released already blog posts with his thoughts. This isn't something that Dario Amodei does quite as much, but now he has. And it's a very, very detailed examination of the implications of AI, in particular, the positive implications. So he begins with this whole thing of like, why don't I go and be more positive? It kind of feels a little bit like maybe he was just talking to investors and making it seem like Anthropic is a bit less safety oriented or is optimistic about AI. Either way, a lot of interesting notes in this. It's very long, but I would say it's very long because it's very nuanced. So he goes into a lot of detail, and it's not sort of like rambling. It's very well thought out from my read of it. The gist of it is that Amodei defines a notion of AGI. So he says AGI isn't a very useful term. Instead, there's this term powerful AI, and the definition of it is AI that is smarter than a Nobel Prize winner in fields like biology and engineering, and is capable of performing tasks like proving unsolved mathematical theorems and writing high-quality novels. And he has this nice phrase for summing up the implications of it is, if we get these powerful AIs and we can run multiple instances of them, it's not computationally crazy, we would get a country of geniuses in a data center, right? And so the beginning of blog post sets up this idea, sets up the belief that we'll be getting this in probably 5 to 10 years. And then the rest of it, maybe 10,000 words or something like that, is about the implications for different things. So he talks about the implication for biology, right? For being able to make a lot of progress on very significant issues we've been unable to tackle, like obviously cancer, curing genetic diseases, halting Alzheimer's at earlier stages, all coming in the next 7 to 12 years. He says there's this nice term again. You can think of it as the compressed 21st century. The idea that after powerful AI is developed, we will in a few years make all the progress in biology and medicine that we would have made in the whole 21st century without it. And then there's multiple other topics he gets into. He gets into inequality and the implications for economies, particularly of the developing world, where again, there's some nuance. He says, I'm not as confident that AI can address inequality and economic growth as I am that it can invent fundamental technologies, because technology has such obvious high returns to intelligence, whereas the economy involves a lot of constraints for humans. That's the kind of writing you're dealing with. Is pretty sophisticated stuff. But yes, he gets into things like global economy, climate change, even the sort of like more philosophical things regarding meaning and work. And of course, he does have a lot of caveats about the potential side effects, dangers, etc., of it. So very long essay, but I think a very interesting and well thought out essay on the implications of powerful AI coming within this next decade, most likely.
No question. This is super aligned. This is super aligned, like hopefully our future AI systems, with my own take of what's going to be happening in the coming decades. I am highly techno-optimistic, like Dario Amodei is, and he hits the nail on the head with so many points in here. The country of geniuses in a data center is perfect. Like that's something I talked about a lot around the release of O1 a couple of weeks ago, where you extrapolate this kind of capability, where you scale more in terms of, something like increasing the number of parameters, or something that has that kind of ability to increase the nuance of these models. Plus, you scale inference time, and it's not hard to see that we could have in a couple of years AI systems that are like what Dario Amodei here calls powerful AI, where it's like a Nobel Prize winner. You have Jeff Hinton and Demis Hassabis level of intellect in machines. And then, like you said, Andrey, you can scale that up. You can have a country of geniuses in a data center, all thinking away at complex problems. There are some things like, he talked about Alzheimer's specifically, and some things like that, those do seem a bit trickier to me because those still require real world experimentation. The algorithm can have a hypothesis, but then you need to test it on, lab rats and then eventually humans once you've confirmed that that's safe over a number of years. So there's some kind of constraints. It's like that classic, 9 women can't make a baby in a month. There's some kinds of things related to scientific inquiry that are beyond just things you can infer based on information. There's some new information sometimes that needs to be acquired from the world with experiments that take time. So that will, slow down some types of progress. The bigger kind of progress that Dario also hits the head on here is social progress, where unlike fundamental discoveries, which are something that you can just have happen kind of unconstrained by social or governmental pressures, the then distribution of that equitably, that is still something that could be a really tricky problem. Like, you might have, you might be able to create crops that would provide high quality nutrition to everyone on the planet. You might technically have that, but that doesn't mean that North Korea is going to allow you to have those crops in their country.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I also share your kind of take where in general, I'm more on an optimistic front. And this is a very grounded, very analytical exploration of why we should be optimistic and sort of the details of it. To be a bit more precise, he defines powerful AI as these things and says that it could come as early as 2026, though there are also ways in which it could take much longer. And what it actually focuses on is what happens in the 5 to 10 years after we get powerful AI. So the idea being that, we get all of these very nice outcomes, ideally from AI, if we don't mess it up. And of course, it does also call out that it's not all roses. There are dangers associated with AI, and we do need to think about it. Anthropic is heavily focused on AI safety. So, very nice read, I will say. In a lot of discussions of AGI, of the future of AI, it tends to be a little bit more sci-fi, not grounded in definitions, not grounded in analysis. This very much is. And just a couple more stories. The first one is once again about nuclear power. So Google has partnered with Kairos Power to construct 7 small nuclear reactors in the US to power these technologies. The first reactor is expected to be operational by 2030, with the rest deployed by 2035. So the statement from Google is that these would offer a clean, constant power source that could meet the electricity demands with carbon-free energy. Kairos Power is a nuclear energy startup which has some kind of newer technology related to nuclear power. Of course, this is related to a recent move by Microsoft, also related to using the undamaged reactor at 3 Mile Island. So, overall, seems like AI is making us embrace nuclear power at a rapid pace, which hasn't been so much the case in the past century, really. And the other story we're going to cover is more on the research front, as we often do. We have some research related to safety. The paper is LLMs Know More Than They Show on the Intrinsic Representation of LLM Hallucinations. So what this goes into is how recent studies have shown that LLMs' internal states encode information regarding the truthfulness of their outputs, and this can be used to detect errors. And what they do is analyze this pattern a little bit more. So they show that there are this information about truthfulness has more kind of clarity than previously realized, and that information is concentrated in specific tokens. So that means that looking at these specific tokens leads to much better error detection. Although these error detectors don't necessarily generalize entirely, meaning that truthfulness encoding is not universal. The encodings are somewhat different across different topics, for instance. So, very practical implications here. Of course, hallucinations, LLMs just making stuff up is a big issue with using these tools in practice, and these kinds of approaches that look at the outputs, the representations to detect whether the LLM is hallucinating could very much be deployed by LLM providers.
Yeah, it's important research here. Being able to stamp out hallucinations almost entirely is key to so much success in AI, including particularly when we talk about agentic AI systems, multi-agent systems. If you even have a 1% error rate in a multi-agentic system that has 10 agents passing off between each other, that 1% error rate compounds and becomes a really big deal. So, you need to be talking about fractions of a percentage. And the smaller, the more zeros we can put in front of that after the decimal place, the better our future AI systems are going to be.
And on to the last section, synthetic media and art. And this is also the last story. We only have one here. We started with Adobe. We're ending with Adobe. And this one is not related to a new AI tool. It is a free web app called Adobe Content Authenticity, and that will allow creators to attach content credentials to their digital work. So you can think of it as a nutrition label for digital creations that provides information that makes it easier for original content to be traced back to its creators. So this web app enables photographers and digital artists to apply these content credentials to all their content. It can include a verified name or identity and links to their website and social media profiles. And this is the kind of thing, we've been talking a lot about with regards to AI, that we would need something like this, some metadata attached to files, to media, to let us know whether it's AI or not, whether it's by a real human or some product. So in addition to watermarks like SynthID that are being built into Gemini and also meta tools, this could be used by human creators when they publish their photographs or their images to essentially claim credit. And on top of having this be a tool, they're also releasing a Google Chrome extension to allow users interact with and view content credentials online. And of course, as a user, you can also inspect the content credentials of a given file to be able to see that. And, it can sort of act like a digital fingerprint almost. This is now in free public beta, or will be rather, this will be available in free public beta starting early next year. And they do say it will be further integrated into their actual apps like Photoshop, etc.
Yeah, nice to come full circle with Adobe here. The Adobe Super episode, not sponsored by Adobe in any way.
If only. But yeah, I mean, I think this is one of these things, again, not going to get many headlines, probably, right? Hasn't been the talk of the town in AI, but one of these things that could have big implications for many people who work in this field, who have concerns about AI generations for things like photographs or just misinformation. This is the sort of thing we need to embrace to tackle those kinds of things. And that's it for the episode. Once again, we are hitting roughly the 90-minute mark. Maybe we'll keep doing it. We'll see. So thank you, as always, for listening. We appreciate it. As always, you can go to lastweekin.ai to subscribe to the newsletter. That will also have links for all of the stories here. And you can also look at the description of the episode for that. We'll also have links to Super Data Science podcast and to this upcoming event webinar hosted by Jon coming up in December. And thank you, Jon, once again for being a fantastic guest co-host.
My great pleasure. It's truly an honor to always be on my favorite podcast to listen to, the only podcast I always listen to, Last Week in AI. Yeah, such a treat to be on here. Thank you, Andrey, for the invitation. And yeah, thanks all you listeners for your time and attention again today.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, listeners, for listening. Presumably, if you're here, you're listening to the very end, which I always find pretty impressive. And as always, we do appreciate your comments, reviews. I try to keep a lookout to make sure I don't miss any. And of course, since you got to the end of the episode, hopefully you will enjoy the full version of the AI-generated song I made for this episode.
In a world of ones and zeros painted bright, Adobe dreams take flight. With Tesla's future rolling down the streets, Cybercab visions where tomorrow meets. All the AI minds are shaping our skies. Nobels for the visionaries, no surprise. Stories of a week where tech inspires. Last week in AI. Dive into the code where the pixels gleam. Electric dreams unfold in every machine. The fast lane, Tesla's future rides. Adobe's canvas broadens with AI as our guides. From Nobel minds the week gone by. We've got tech tales soaring high. Last week in AI is the reason why. With every buy, imaginations fly. Future unfolds. Last week in AI, tales yet untold. Iconic campus drawn from the cloud. With each innovation, we sing it out loud. Stories of a week with still on lies. Memories in our sight. Towers escape, dark guys free. Covid it die, get a promo. Big Tesla's visions, strategy in the nation.